Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And we always like to get our updated information. The best way to do that is go to the source. We find that out from Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office. As we welcome back into the program, one of our favorites, Blake Tabor. Lieutenant, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Listen, one of those things we get some disturbing news. You and I deal in a world where we get disturbing news and some of the things we have to deal with. Let's talk about this woman in Berg that got arrested for child abuse.
Yeah, so this one was particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
On or about November 2nd, shortly after 2 o'clock, we were called to a local elementary school where they reported that a 6-year-old student had shown up to school with some pretty significant facial trauma. And ultimately that led to them contacting authorities.
Right.
Ultimately, the Special Victims Unit became involved in that very quickly. As we began our initial investigation, the child made some allegations against a person by the name of Gina Domingue. Of course, we are not providing any information. You see her pictured here. We're not providing any information as to the relation of that relationship or if there is any.
Right.
But ultimately, she was determined to be responsible through allegations from the child. Again, anytime we have these situations, a very extensive investigation goes into this to make sure that we are proving what the child is saying through evidence and documentation. So some pretty serious and disturbing evidence sort of surfaced when it came to this. Initially, there was some determination about what happened to the child, whether it was an injury that happened as a result of other children or whether it happened as a result of the female.
Right.
Ultimately, the evidence surfaced, and ultimately Ms. Domingue was brought in for questioning where she admitted to being responsible for the child's injuries.
Wow. And it's really interesting to me. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the SVU unit and making sure that they are doing everything that they can. But it's the damage that it's not just physical to these kids. I mean, we've got to do years of help to make sure that we make this child more productive and learn that that's not what should be considered normal. That's not acceptable behavior.
Sure. And, I'm not going to portray myself as a fortune teller, but, statistics have shown that this child will remember this for the rest of their life. I don't think that we think about it oftentimes about the impact that we have on children at such a small age. I think the common misconception is that, they won't remember this, they're too young, when in actuality, it's quite the opposite.
Right. And very often we know psychodynamically that children actually, their personality gets developed by age 5 or 6. And so their personality is developed, and now they've got this physical altercations and physical abuse, if you will, if it comes down to that. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what we're investigating. And it just can be so very, very difficult to do and see. And so I'm glad that you guys are so very involved in that and working on that and bringing people to justice who do that and hopefully prevent that from happening again. Now, speaking of people with needs and sometimes special needs, tell us a little bit about these kids from this particular special disabilities class at HL. They got a chance to go visit you guys.
So, in my job in public information, I field a lot of calls.
Right.
So I guess about a month ago, I was reached out by one of the teachers. You see him directly standing behind the sheriff in the gray shirt.
Yeah.
Mr. Foray, and he asked if he could bring his special disabilities class to the sheriff's office for a tour. And of course, I'm all about that.
Yeah.
I love these type of children that are involved in this. I myself had a relative that was a special needs child as well, so I have a soft spot for them.
Right.
We lined it up and we brought them out. We made them goodie bags. We took a tour of the facility. You see them pictured here. It was one of the most amazing things I have been a part of in recent memory. You can't have a bad time when you're around these type of children, and the teachers as well. You see them there. We allowed them to sit on a motorcycle that we have for the sheriff's office. Most of these children spend their life in a wheelchair,
right,
and have never had the ability to even sit on a motorcycle. So the joy and smiles on their faces when they got a chance to sit on it, it was just, you can't have a bad day.
Well, think about that. They go from sitting on this motorcycle that's so very unique, right, and special to them, and they get to sit in the sheriff's chair.
Absolutely.
And hang out with him as he kind of defers to them. as he says, you come be front and center. Let me be
Absolutely.
second to you. In a world where very often they have to deal with some of their own issues and abuses and prejudices, and those people that just, it's incredible to see. And I'm like you, I got a chance to do this for several years and working with Special Olympians and being involved in our local, state, national Special Olympics, where I got to see the love and the purity that comes from so many people that have these special needs.
The purity of heart. And you know what, I even described this to my wife last night. I said, they're incapable of hate. They don't know what that word is
No.
and never will.
No.
And you know, when you look at the purity of what they do, you wish that we had a little bit more of that in us.
Yeah. We kind of wonder, where did mine go?
Where did we go wrong?
Right?
Where did we
Where
go
did all this love that I know that I had when I was younger, where did it go? And quite frankly, I think it goes into this luggage that we carry around with
Absolutely.
us, this emotional baggage we bring with us. They don't have that.
Nope.
They just have this raw love and appreciation. And so you got to hold some hands, you got to get some hugs, you got to
Man,
get
it
some
was
kisses. Isn't that
fantastic.
cool?
And you know, one particular, if you go back to the picture of all of us together, there was one particular student, Chloe. You see her hugging the sheriff here, and that was synonymous with Chloe's personality. I lost count of how many times she kissed me on the cheek.
Right.
And every single person in the office she came into contact with, it was a hug and a kiss.
Yeah, and
it was fantastic.
they know that type of childlike love, and it doesn't go anywhere. Speaking of not going anywhere, we appreciate you sticking with us, staying around.
Absolutely.
So we'll take a little time. We'll come back with some other information and news that we have on a couple of stories, and we'll do that when we come back on this edition of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. We welcome back Lieutenant Blake Tabor. Thanks for joining us once again.
You're welcome.
All right, man, we appreciate it. And so I know we talked about some feel-good stuff, and that's always a wonderful thing to be able to do. One of the things that makes us feel good is knowing that you guys are out there fighting and making sure that we're bringing those people to justice, and more importantly, getting some people off the streets. Let's talk a little bit about the 3 that were arrested with this narcotics.
Sure. So
investigation.
this was an investigation that was developed through our narcotics and canine divisions. Outstanding group of individuals.
Yep.
Relentless when it comes to what they do on a daily basis. So I applaud them completely. They received some information over the last few days in reference to some suspicious activity in the 400 block of High Ridge, which is in Dularge. So, of course, they sort of targeted that particular area. Once they got into that particular block of High Ridge, they started noticing some suspicious behavior by certain people, and ultimately came into contact with 3 individuals at a residence in that block. That quickly led to a search warrant being developed for the house, and ultimately 3 people were arrested. We'll talk about the first one as a Mariah Joanne Carrere. You see her pictured here. She was arrested for at least 4 different counts of possession of firearm and drug-related offenses, and she's currently jailed at the Criminal Justice Complex on a $5,000 bond. The second person that we came into contact with on that particular night was a Dean Porsche Jr. He subsequently was arrested for 7 different firearms and drug-related offenses, along with some outstanding warrants. And he still remains jailed on a $25,500 bond at the Criminal Justice Complex. And then last but not least, the third suspect was a John Adam Verrett. You see him photographed here. He was ultimately arrested for 9 different counts, and I'll read off some of the charges that he was arrested for, which is pretty similar to what some of the others were arrested for. Illegal possession of a stolen firearm, illegal carrying of a weapon in the presence of narcotics, possession with intent to distribute CDS-2, possession with intent to distribute CDS-1, possession of drug paraphernalia, and possession of firearm by a person convicted of domestic violence offenses, along with transactions involving proceeds and some other unrelated warrants. He is currently also in jail on a $100,000 bond.
And so, you know, it's really interesting. You bring up some things, this chemical dependency, the CD substance 1, Schedule 1, Schedule 2.
Yep.
This is the breakdown of some of these illegal drugs that we know have been on our streets for some time. And that's the big concern, is that we've got these scheduled drugs that they are dealing with. And I love the fact that there are separate charges that go with these illegal firearms and the illegal drugs. They tend to go hand in hand.
That's
the
correct.
difficulty is about how dangerous both are.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would imagine the criminal element would argue that, you know, I need that for protection. Well, it's the old adage, if you're not doing illegal activity, why do you need that for protection? You know, but they are synonymous with each other, but both can escalate very quickly, and that's why we target both.
Right. And we know that the drugs on the streets are being very harmful and difficult and killing people. And we also know that these firearms that, you know, not regulated, right?
Sure.
These stolen firearms, you know, not regulated. And so it's just one of these things where it's so very important for us to kind of think about how we do that, how we manage that, and how we make sure that we get these people off the streets and make sure we get the drugs off the street, get the firearms off the street.
Absolutely.
And protect those people around them.
The important part of this was how this information came in. You know, this information was reported anonymously, and we are always accepting anonymous information through our agency. And so what our hope is that the public sees that when you call in information, we're going to do our due diligence and check into that. Sometimes there's nothing we can do, or there's very little we can do. Other times it could lead to a very major arrest like this. And we just never know until you take the opportunity to call that information in and get involved in the safety of your own neighborhoods.
Yeah, and we care a great deal about the safety of those neighborhoods. And that leads right into the safety of what happens over in Montague. We had something else happening in Montague as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this was some breaking news yesterday. So again, we're at a point where this is still an ongoing investigation, so we're not releasing any additional information relative to the suspect's name. But we were called to a levee in the area of Montague in reference to a male subject that had broken through a closed gate and struck a parish vehicle. Once we responded, our officers, of course, tried to make contact with that particular person, and that quickly led to a vehicle pursuit. The person was driving very erratically down Highway 55. Ultimately, that culminated in a crash between a sheriff's office unit and the suspect vehicle. Both vehicles ended up careening into an unoccupied residence. It's important to note that it was unoccupied at the time. So no one inside of the residence was injured, but the wreck did happen, and ultimately it led to 2 deputies being sought out for medical treatment along with the driver of the vehicle.
Wow. And again, we're going to get more information about this as the investigation continues. They always have a lot more information about them, but we certainly want all three of these individuals to be okay. We certainly want our 2 sheriff's officers.
Sure, and a lot of moving parts with this. I can tell you that none of the injuries appear to be life-threatening on either part, so that's a plus. But this could have ended very differently.
Yes. Imagine if that was an occupied home.
Absolutely.
And it just from there, or people on the streets, or people close by, someone driving erratically, and our sheriff's officers trying to get them off the road safely. And so we're glad it ended safely.
It takes 1 second to change people's lives, and we're very aware of that, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Blake, we appreciate all of the news, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. And so we appreciate that. Thank y'all for boots on the ground, taking care of us and keeping us safe.
Thank you. Very welcome.
All right. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more Bayou time when we continue.